Hi there, I'm Lindsay Schwan.
I'm Kelly Franks, and this is Permission to Explore, the podcast. We're combining our 3 decades in the fitness industry, decade in the wellness and coaching industry, and our lifetimes of spiritual and self-development journey to support you in making yourself a priority in your own life.
This podcast is a combination of health science, brain science, mindset magic, and fun, all rolled into one, and gives you permission to explore you. What drives you? What do you truly want for your life? How can you make that happen? What's really holding you back?
If you're tired of the people-pleasing, overdoing, overcommitting, and the exhaustion that comes from it all,
if you're wanting more time for yourself, more joy, more peace in your life, then stick with us. We're here for you. This is Permission to Explore, the podcast, and we're glad you're here. Now let's explore. Hello, everybody. Wonderful, wonderful listeners. Welcome back. I'm Lindsay.
I'm Kelly.
And today we have an amazing special guest. I'm so excited for this episode and for you to meet her. So I'm just going to say right up at the top, you're probably going to want to get in contact with us and follow up with us with questions about this episode.
Especially this episode.
I know, right? It's going to be so full of mind-blowing information. Everyone's going to be like, holy cow. So you can reach out to us at Permission to Explore Retreats at gmail.com. We can hook you up with any information that you need. Come check us out on Instagram, Permission to Explore Retreats, Facebook, Permission to Explore Retreats. And our DMs are always open, so feel free to reach out. I know that the topics we tend to talk about can be a little uncomfortable to talk about. So maybe you have questions, but you're not like, I just want to comment publicly. Feel free to send us those DMs. Our box is open. So let's do this. Our special guest, Reshanda Yates, is here. Reshanda, tell the people why you're so awesome and how you help and why this episode is going to blow their minds.
Yes. Thanks so much for having me, ladies. I'm so happy to be here. And I am awesome because
a
lot of reasons. Number one, I live in one of the best places in the world. We just had Mardi Gras, New Orleans area. So that was awesome. And my passion is helping women to break free from binge eating so that they can have peace and release weight while enjoying the foods that they love. That's my jam. And I'm just so happy to be here.
See, I told you you were going to you're going to listen to this episode and be like, oh my gosh, I need all this information. So like we said, Permission to Explore Retreats at gmail.com. We will also hook you up with Reshanda's information in the show notes as well, of course. So let's just dive into it. Kel, you got questions you want to kick it off with?
Well, yes, of course.
Well, yes, I do.
Of course I do. So first of all, how did you get into this type of work that you do? I mean, obviously, I'm sure you have a personal story, but what kind of brought you to this place of doing this kind of coaching for women specifically?
Sure. This is going to sound so cliche, but I didn't choose it. It chose me. I mean, and literally that is exactly what happened. Mm-hmm. And I think it's part of my life's work myself. But as a part of my own healing journey, around 2015, I just got fed up with trying to do things, in a forceful way, like losing weight, for example. I would just keep trying to do diets and failing them. And I felt, very frustrated, and out of my own frustration, just started looking for other solutions. And I thought, what if I were just stop this and just be happy? And so, I started looking for ways to be happy instead of looking for ways to change my body. And I honestly cannot tell you what made me do that.
Mhm.
But what happened was I started finding solutions. So another cliche for you is like when the student is ready, then the teacher appears.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
I found those teachers for myself, and I found this group that was focused around just like learning how to cook and how to eat mindfully. And I just kind of immersed myself in that world. And one day someone asked about her struggles with binge eating in the group. And so I thought about it for like a week because I had really resonated with her and I had been finding all these things that worked for me. And so I just like went and wrote this like novel in the comments back to her. And the group leader, her name is Daria Rose, she saw my post and she was like, I would love to have you on my podcast. She had a podcast called Foodist Kitchen. And she's like, this is amazing. Can you come on my podcast and talk about your story? And so I did. And it became her most downloaded podcast.
Wow.
And, people were just flooding in her comments, like, how can we reach Reshanda? Now, it just so happened that about that same time I had left my job and I was thinking about being a coach, but I had no idea what I was going to coach people on. And then voila, like, I mean, it sounds like a made up story, right? But that's literally, that's what happened. So people just asked me for it. And so I started helping.
I love it. I love
That's
everything
awesome.
about that because we talk frequently, especially in our retreats. We kind of have this discussion, a theme of, women that are like, I don't know what my purpose is, right? And the pressure of finding the purpose. And we're always like, what do you enjoy? Do that, right? Like just follow the joy and then let go of the expectation of it. And I love using Kelly as the example because that's exactly how Kelly got to where she is right now.
Wow.
And her purpose, it's the same thing. Like I really needed to take care of myself. So I started doing these things called Pilates on my VHS, and now that's what I do.
Yeah.
It's
people
so cool.
people ask for my help and I said, okay. And
and it's so funny because I would hear people talk about that. And I too was like, yeah, right, whatever, let me go and make it hard and make it complicated.
Right.
Meanwhile, while I was doing that, my life like happened to me,
Right. Yeah. Meanwhile, while I was doing that.
Well, we always like to make things more complicated.
Oh, that human.
That's
human
what we
thing.
do as humans.
As humans. So I know this is a, broad general question, but how do you help people break free from binge eating?
Yes.
Oh, of course. Yes. Well, the way that I do it is by taking them through a 3-pillar methodology that I created. And the reason why I created this methodology was because one of the number one things I hear from women is I know what to do. I just can't get myself to do it. And so I created the embodiment method. And the purpose of the embodiment method is to help women to do that, to embody that person that they want to be as an eater. And there's 3 pillars. It's integrated identity, aligned eating choices, and mastery of self-control. And we can dive deeper into that if you want, but that's how I do it.
That's how I do it.
Yeah.
So, and I know this is, maybe silly, but what exactly is binge eating? How do you define that? What are characteristics of that?
Yeah. That's a great question. It's not silly at all because I think that it's something that can easily be misdiagnosed, misunderstood. And the thing that I like to really refer to when I, if I'm helping someone to self-diagnose, I think self-diagnosis is the number one way. to determine whether or not, you suffer from binge eating. And it's how you feel when when you eat. It doesn't even have to be a large amount of food necessarily, but it's more associated with like, do you feel ashamed after you eat? Are you beating yourself up after eating? Do certain foods make you fearful or anxious? Do you not trust yourself because you think like, I'm gonna go overboard if I allow myself to enjoy this food? It's things like that that are really more inside the person. Like they are thinking them, they are feeling those things. And like, a good example to show you the difference is like my husband, like he has never struggled with binge eating, yet he will consume like 3 meals in one sitting every now and then. And, he just it doesn't phase him mentally. And he just moves on, and his weight, like even if he gains a little weight, his weight just always normalizes back out because he doesn't worry about it. Mm-hmm. And so like that was one of the eye openers for me when I started like thinking about, my own internal dialogue and thoughts and like feelings like shame and guilt and all of that stuff. And I compare myself to my husband and I'd be like, huh, that's interesting. He just moves on. And for me, and for many binge eaters, it is very difficult to just move on. We just get caught up in that, that guilt shame spiral.
For sure. I just had a conversation like last week with a health coaching client, and it was exactly what you just said. This, like, I have to avoid this because I have no self-control around this food, or I don't trust myself around this food. And I was like, I get that. I distinctly remember 10, 15 years ago, I was with some fellow coworkers at the gym. We're trainers at the gym. We were in a volleyball league and we were playing for the championship. And they were like, we're going to go to the Mexican restaurant after, like, no matter what, team dinner and drinks. And I was like, I can't go. And one of my teammates that I work with, she was like, why? And I go, I honestly don't know how to not binge on chips and salsa and 2 margaritas and my creamy shrimp enchiladas. I don't know how to not eat that, and it felt so like silly and stupid to say that. And yet, I'm like, this is literally my profession, and still being like, I don't trust myself around that, while recognizing, avoiding this is just going to cause the binge later. Like completely recognizing that pattern of this, like, I'll never get to eat it again, which usually leads to a like gorge myself on it later thing. And I literally walked through it with her, and I'm not exaggerating when I say, like, I freaking held her hand as we sat down at the Mexican restaurant to eat dinner that night, because I just did not trust myself that I could eat in a healthy way there.
Yeah.
And you guys, it's possible. I know it's shocking, but it is possible.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you have something about that, right? I think you called it your trigger immunity. Can you tell us more about that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. First of all, I want to point out that, what you talked about, I can really relate to that. I remember being so fearful of going out to eat. And just like even the thought about going out to eat, it wouldn't just be about the meal of going out to eat. It would be, my mind would already be at, okay, and then after the meal, I'm going to this and this and this, and I'm going to go home and eat that and that and that. Like it was just, it's so crazy how much of it is just about the thoughts. But that feeling that you described, or that, like, just not trusting yourself, but also at the same time as you're not trusting yourself, being so aware of, like, I know exactly what's going to happen. Like I know the play by play. I know the entire cycle and I know what my triggers are. And this is what I call people like this aware food prisoners. And the reason why I talk about this is because it's just this eerie thing of knowing, you know, everything, you know it, you know, you have your list of triggers, you know, like what food set you off, you know, all this stuff, you know, exactly what times of day, you know, if it's at home and I come home and I binge or whatever, but yet not being able to stop. And so what I help people do is to develop something that I've called trigger immunity. And what this is, you can kind of think of it like, if you are, if you have immunity like from a virus or something like that, then you are in a state of health and well-being so that you are just less susceptible to that virus. Or it might be that you've had, a certain amount of exposure to that virus, but you've built up an immunity to it. Like people are familiar with that. And so it's kind of the same thing with triggers. What we don't want to avoid is, what we don't want to do is avoid everything, because whatever we avoid, it magnifies. I think most people can probably relate to this. Like if you have any kind of phobia or something like that, what do people always say? They say, face your fears, right?
Yeah.
But, I feel like, even something I was thinking about, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I was thinking about today, there's nothing to fear except fear yourself, right? Cliche again. So today's cliche day for me.
I love a cliche phrase because they're cliche for a reason.
Exactly. They're cliches because they're true.
They're true. And they just last and last.
Right.
Yeah.
That's how they become cliches. So, when we avoid things, when we make them bad or we make them wrong, we end up building them up and up and up so that we're afraid of the thing. And so what I teach people to do is how to actually know themselves well enough and understand their biological mechanisms, their psychology, their attitudes, like what things are happening within them when they're in a triggered state so that they can go into any situation. It's kind of like battle training in the military, right? Like they do certain things to condition themselves to be ready even when the shit. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if we're
That's okay. It's okay.
It's
Kelly
the
drops
fan.
F-bombs all the time.
Good.
It's her favorite word.
Sneaks out every once in a while.
Yeah, so that's what it's about. Is trigger immunity is really about being able to build yourself up so that you can go into any environment, even if you have no control over what is in front of you, what foods are around you. The partner brings, something home that maybe you would binge on. Like being able to make empowered choices, no matter where you are. Whether you're on vacation or you're at home, what time of day, that's what trigger immunity helps you to do.
I mean, it sounds like, I'm not going to let this food have that power over me.
Yeah.
Instead of like, I'm just going to avoid it so I don't.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and it's not just the food. It's, I'm not letting this food have power over me. I'm not letting what another person says to me that, was cross or, ill intent have any power over me. I'm not going to let the fact, just because I had a long day and there were stressors coming at me, that doesn't mean that I have to binge at the end of the day. So it's really taking back power of, we understand like our external environment, we only have so much control over it. Those are external circumstances. What we're taking control over is our internal circumstances when we develop trigger immunity.
Yeah. Snap, 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 snap,
Yeah.
snaps and claps.
Well, the funny thing is, as you were speaking, I'm like, it's very similar to like a toddler and telling them no repeatedly. When you say no repeatedly, guess what they do? So if
They
you're
say yes.
doing
I don't
that
have
to
kids, so I
yourself,
don't know.
no, they do the thing that you're telling them they can't.
I'm going to do it anyway.
If you're having that same sort of battle, right, with
Yes.
yourself, what's going to happen? You're going to end up doing the thing anyway, right? Because you keep telling yourself, I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't do that. So there's a little bit of like, you have to kind of change your internal dialogue some.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, we talk about that all the time, about changing the way you speak to yourself, the way you talk to yourself, because your words matter.
Yeah. I know. And Reshanda knows, you know, my favorite phrase is, everything is meaningless unless you give it meaning.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So
right.
Yes.
I'm also laughing because I'm like, Kelly used the toddler example or a teenager.
Right.
You tell them no, and they're going to be like,
true.
I'm going to do it anyway.
Although teenagers, the risk is a little higher.
But I mean, that's how the brain works, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, we just made a post about this, you know, willpower is a finite resource, you know, so how much energy are you spending by having that battle in your head all the time?
Yes.
No wonder you're exhausted.
Yeah.
And then how many of us, when we are completely exhausted, are like, I need that sugar pickup. I need that carb pickup. I need to self-soothe because I'm exhausted and I don't know how to continue. And that's one thing I've really discovered in doing just, you know, general internal work, is a lot of my exhaustion came from my head.
Yeah.
Just constantly going, like, you know, just nonstop, like 10 layers of that self-talk, and not even recognizing 5 of those layers until you got rid of the other ones. You know, like, it's exhausting in my head. Again, did this all by myself. Right. Like,
I mean, I can 100% relate to that, 1,000%. You know, I would manage so much in my head to the point where, you know, I couldn't manage it anymore. That's basically what happened. And like, it wasn't just like my thoughts about myself, but it was my thoughts about other people. What did other people think of me? Let me try and control how other people perceive me, why? I don't know how I even thought I could do that.
Right.
But it was all of that, you know, that was going on in my head. So I can relate.
I was just going to say, like, when you said I was managing so much stuff in my head and I wanted like half of it, not even mine to manage. Right. But
Yes. Yes.
just going to keep managing it. Like, so, you kind of answered this already, but what are some of like binge eating indicators or the common things that you see over and over with the women that you work with?
Yes. So I would say that, you know, many of the women that I work with really struggle with a need to or desire to control things. So, you know, it's pretty obvious with the food, right? But when you dig deeper than that, you start to realize that, you know, it's a general desire to control. So like, for example, in my own life, I did want to control, you know, like my husband, for example. That didn't cause issues.
Not at all.
You know, I wanted to control my body. You know, I wanted to try perfectionism. That's another one, a huge one.
Yep.
Which kind of goes into hand in hand with the, you know, image management and trying to control how other people perceive me. Like, I really wanted people to think that, you know, that I was smart, impressive, you know, had it all together or whatever. Meanwhile, on the inside, I was really a mess. And just this desire to look perfect, to control the situation, and really, you know, going back to what we were just talking about, like the overthinking, it all ties hand in hand together. And, you know, I think that's really what it makes us get into this like spiral, this cycle of trying to fix our eating, but we really just keep going in circles with the behavior.
Right.
So, it's hard to say which one of those three would be at the top of the list. I feel like they're so interrelated,
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I totally get that. It's kind of the same for us too. When we talk about general well-being, right? That perfectionism consistently comes up. The shame, guilt, judgment generally for ourselves tends to come up to the top of the list, and then that need to control without recognizing it as control, right? Like that, I think that's the trickiest part about control is finding that spot when it's like, no, it's not, we'll talk about, it's not control, it's choice. Right? Like it's not about, I'm going to control this, I'm going to control my eating, but it's about choosing what I'm eating, choosing how I'm participating versus trying to control the participation and finding those differentiations in there.
I love that.
Cal, you got another question?
Yeah, we had talked about before in our pre-chat, we had talked about eating disordered and disordered eating.
Yes.
You kind of mentioned it as disordered eating. Will you kind of elaborate on that? Because I really liked that because I had never thought of it in that way, like not necessarily someone who has an eating disorder,
right.
In that sense of it, but the way that you kind of described it as disordered eating.
Yeah, you really blew our minds with that.
Yeah, I like wrote it down, circled it. I was like, whoa, I've never heard anyone say it like that before. So
yeah, it's funny how you can just switch a couple of words around and it's just a whole different meaning. Yeah. But so with eating disorder, a very small percentage of the population are formally diagnosed, but disordered eating is actually pretty common.
Yeah.
And I would say that the main difference is that with disordered eating, what I'm really helping people do is to gain like mental tools, psychological tools. And also I throw in a little dabble of spiritual tools as well, because I'm a very spiritual person myself and I can't help it.
This is why we connect.
Yeah, exactly. So with eating disorder, you may find clinical treatments are applied, like medications and things like that, where, I think that someone like myself who can help someone with disordered eating, that's the like filling in the missing gaps in someone's treatment. So think of it like if you get sick, you take your medicine, but then you still want to make sure you're like eating healthy in general, that supports your overall well-being. So when I talk about disordered eating, part of that is like a disclaimer, so that I can make sure that people understand where my expertise and the service that I help people with, the way that I help people begins and ends. And that people who are maybe struggling with things like, starvation, things that are that there's a point when you need to seek medical attention. And I can't necessarily tell you, it's unfortunate that you can't just like look at somebody and tell when that is, but and that's a whole other topic. But so that's what the term is. It's just a way of differentiating what the pool of people are that I'm addressing. So it could be that if you might have an eating disorder and still come to me for help, but also mix and match your support.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
You mentioned at the top, you live in a very special place full of very special food.
Lots of special food.
All the special food. And as someone who will plan vacations around food, how do you navigate that? Like, frankly, I love food, right? Like, as you said, I get really excited about food.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. And I also find it tricky to navigate, say, so many things are, right, like shared experiences around food, where food kind of becomes like a way to connect, which is a top value of mine, right? So I will go on that food vacation, and to me, it's like taking in the culture, taking in the environment, and connecting. Like, that's why food vacations are high for me. It's all of my favorite top values, right? It's connection, it's travel, it's joy, it's all the things I love. But also realizing, like, hey, you can't just binge for 5 days on vacation.
Right. Yeah,
How
I
do
can
you
totally
survive in New Orleans?
Right.
Man, it's definitely a challenge here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can totally relate to that. You know, I remember going like on vacation with my family and stuff, and I remember feeling very excited about food, and also finding myself so wrapped up in the food that I wouldn't actually enjoy all of those additional experiences. So I think that is really the differentiating line there, is you want to be in a place where food is a part of the experience, not the experience itself. And so, and what that really takes is having the right set of skills and tools in your tool bag to be able to do that. And the way that I see it is, it really is a partnership with my body. You know, it's informed by my intuition and making choices, you know, using my reason to make choices in the moment. I'll give you an example. One time I went to Destin, Florida, a couple of years back. It was before the pandemic. And it was a solo vacation. You know, I was out there by myself, and I was going out to eat. And I remember that was when I really, really hit that like sweet spot in my eating. This just came back to me for the first time in years, but I remember going to the restaurant, and this is where my yes and method came out of, that I talk about, you know, in various places on my podcast and things. But it's this idea that, you know, what if you could enjoy your indulgence that you know, maybe you want, you know, the pancakes or whatever. But the and part of that is, and I am still going to take care of myself, you know? So maybe I have the pancakes and I have fruit on the side, you know, or maybe I have the pancakes and I'm not going to, you know, go lie down and continue eating for the rest of the day, but I'm also going to go walk on the beach or go for a swim or something like that, you know, because the all or nothing pattern is quite common. You start to get into this mindset that, you know, once I start, I can't stop, which, you know, going back to that language, it's like when we're saying that, when we're thinking that, then it's happening. And then that reinforces that. It reinforces this belief that that's how it is. And so what if we could challenge that, and we could say, okay, well, what if I, you know, allowed myself this and did something that proves to me that, you know, that I can have balance. And it's like taking little steps like that can get us started, you know. But now where I'm at is I don't put much thought into it at all, because a lot of it is intuitive now. So I started there, but now I'm in a place where, like, if I go out to eat, you know, I see something I want and I just have it, and it turns out to be balance because I've just built the right set of skills and tools and habits and put them together with trusting my body in that partnership.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
So simple and complex as that.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Interesting. Well, and we had spoken before, right, as how much I love food to connect with other people, and then it also becomes the way to disconnect from myself or disconnect from other things that, again, I have no control over, and finding that balance of reconnecting, which is just interesting. I'm like literally just realizing this, that like, some people that shows up specifically as food or binging, right? And some people that shows up as, say, shopping sprees, and some people that shows up, right? Like, and it really does come back to like, hey, connect with yourself, right? Like connect here, move from the head down into the body, and just try to live there some,
That's exactly it. Yeah. And it's the more that, the more that we connect inward, the less and less we feel that compulsion to reach outward for things. And it is, it's a balance, and there's always layers to it as well. Like I do not do it with food, but I do it with other things still, and I still have to catch myself. Like I started playing this game called Lily's Garden on my phone. And like, I started to realize like, whoa, I've been playing this game a long time. Like they gave me like 5 hours of credit, like of lives on the game, and I'm already 2.5 hours in or something like that. Those moments are opportunities. So when we can look at those moments, and instead of beating ourselves up, we can respond with compassion. We can observe, and we can say, oh, look what I did. Like, oops, you can just so much more quickly learn from it. And then you can like really tune into, okay, well, what do I need right now? And a lot of times it's, okay, I just needed a break. Maybe I needed to take a break from being on my computer or whatever, housework, whatever. And I needed a break, but I really can also be mindful about that and set a timer next time. So, I know what my action is.
I just did the same thing. Like I took Facebook off my phone for like, and I was just like, it has to go off. Like I did this app clearing on my phone, and I'm just like, it has to go off. And it's so funny because I really did like build myself up for it in my head, where I was like, all right, you're doing it. You're going to do it. Just push the button and do it, and it's going to be challenging, and it's okay. Like I did that whole, like, yeah, it's going to be a struggle and it's okay. Guess what? It really wasn't a struggle. One person there. Which again, speaking of interesting patterns, like we've discussed this on the podcast, is that I have that pattern of like, man, this was really easy. I'm uncomfortable with it being easy. Let's go make it more difficult. Like, so I built this thing up, and you know what? It's been delightful, right? Like it's been fine. I will go days and be like, oh, you should probably go check Facebook, like log in, but it's, and like you said, what have I done with that time is noticing that it usually comes to, I need a break. So instead I just have like an intentional quiet break, and now my break doesn't last an hour, it lasts like 15 minutes because I'm good. I can go ahead,
Yeah. I find that mine is avoidance. I get on my phone and I just am like, scrolling and doing all this mindless stuff. But mine is avoidance of other things that I should be doing. Which I'm sure you find that a lot with your clients too, is that sometimes that food, that binge eating, is avoidance of something else,
of the other feels, because I do that.
Yeah. I all of the above for me. C, answer C. And yes, I started using this term procrastination recently, and so many people are like, oh my God, yes, like that's it, procrastination.
I love that, procrastinating.
It just was like, resonated so much. And it's like when you have something that you want to do that's important, but it makes you really freaking uncomfortable to do it, but it's really, really important to do it. And, like one thing that's really uncomfortable for me right now is doing lives, doing lives on my Facebook page. And, back in the day, like that would have been something that I would have procrastinated on via eating. Just eat instead. It's much easier. Much more.
I like it a lot more. I know. So it's so funny too, because I have to say this, as we talked about, worrying about other people's perceptions. So as you're saying, it's lives, and I'm sitting here going, I see you live on Instagram every day. And then I go, man, she's killing it. She's live every day. She's so good at that.
Thank you.
So again, we have no idea what other people are thinking.
Right.
Just let it go.
Yeah. Just let it go.
Oh, that's so funny.
Oh my
Oh
gosh.
man, we covered so much, and it's all such good stuff. Kel, is there anything else that's jumping out to you that you want to ask, that you're yearning to know?
What are your burning questions?
What are your burning
questions? There you go, burning questions. Well, when you were talking about your embodiment method, you said something like your 3 pillars. Your third pillar was
mastery of self-control.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go go into that a little bit more? I mean, I know I'm sure we kind of have talked about it, but I don't know, the mastery kind of like that got my attention a little bit. So
yeah, it's actually my favorite pillar. It's actually the pillar that I started with, and it is counterintuitively, it's actually about surrender. That's what this pillar really is about.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not a good surrenderer because I'm a controller.
Yeah.
Well, you're talking to the queen of the control freaks. Recovered. I do consider myself recovered, but it took a lot. It took a lot. And so what mastery of self-control, I take people through a process. It's called it's a method within the method. So it's called the Compass Cravings Method. And it really helps you to turn your cravings from an enemy into an ally by using it as actually a compass. So my philosophy on this is instead of making cravings, bad or good, they're neutral. And when you can get to this place of, just observing them from a neutral place, non-judgmentally, then you can actually use them to move you toward where you want to go, and I believe that, for most of us, we all really want the same thing at the end of the day. We want peace. We want to feel present. We want to feel connected. We want joy. And every time I talk about this and think about this, I just feel so... it's really everything that my work is about. I'm trying not to cry, but I just in my own life, that I remember in desperation, just wanting so badly to feel just like I belong here, and that I'm here and connected to this world, to myself, to other people. And so mastery of self-control is a way of using your cravings as a compass to point you in the direction of joy, of happiness, of peace. And really, when we work from that place of peace, then our food really takes care of itself. And I know it sounds so simple, but that is actually the truth. And it's the truth that really it's not sexy, right? Nobody wants to talk about that. And nobody really wants to hear it, myself included, but it really is where it's at.
Yeah.
Look, I got emotional when you got emotional.
I know. I had to sit up straighter because I was like,
but also because, like you said, it's so true, right? And it's another example of that going inward. of recognizing like, hey, I don't need all these things outside of me to be a certain way for me to feel peace and joy.
Exactly.
Right. And how, in my own personal experience, I've talked about this, how actually very uncomfortable I am with peace. Right. Like it's a very, it in itself is a very uncomfortable place for me, or at least definitely was in March of 2020.
Yeah.
When I really came face to face with it. Right? Like, you're here, deal with you now. Right. Like, and then when you said too, coming to a place of neutrality, how I'm in this space right now where I'm really working through that with like money specifically, being money neutral, right? Or being, as I'm working, I just sent out an email today about my process of emotions and diving into emotions the last 2 months, and how even emotions, coming to a place of neutrality in emotions, right? Like anger, sadness is not bad. Right? Like happiness and joy is not good. It is. It is. They are just the messengers of other things. They are just bringing awareness to what you're really thinking about, or where you're putting your attention, or how you're interpreting things, right?
Yes.
And it's so fascinating how it's like, you know, again, it could fall into food, it can fall into money, it can fall into relationships or Netflix or Amazon. I don't know, like, you know, whatever those kind of devices are, right? And then the many, many layers of those habits and those patterns, and how they continue to show up in new ways.
The whole time you were talking, I was just like, yes.
It's so crazy.
Yes.
I've really been kind of examining, like, for me, the big one is like, I can just be happy without achieving something in order to be happy. Right? I can just be happy without some external stimuli. What, you know, like, just, and again, then just surrendering to that.
Right.
Is just this whole different, like, and again, like I said, realizing that peace, I was so uncomfortable with peace, even though it was the very thing that I said I wanted.
Right.
Right. Like, and then when I had it, oh man, I had so much anxiety in my peace.
Right.
Right. Because I didn't know what that was. And so it was very uncomfortable. Right.
Yeah.
So then it's like, oh, I just got to stay. I just have to surrender to this feeling. Okay. Did I surrender long enough? Is it done now? Like, can I go do something now? Right? I like to go do the things.
Yeah.
Like, as a way to distract myself. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting. I had the same exact experience, you know, of like getting into this conundrum that you described. Like, okay, like I'm happy without external things, and you know, just, but then do I go after stuff? Like, do I go after a goal? Like, why am I here?
Right. Well, I think that's the funny thing, right? Is when you're so conditioned, and that's really what it was for me, right? Is from that young age. And again, that external approval thing, the external approval was deep for this one, very, very deeply ingrained. And when you're kind of conditioned to go achieve, because it got you, you know, the good job, or you're so smart, or look how talented, you know, like all of that stuff, right? I didn't know how to pursue things from a place of not having to prove myself, right? So finding that space of like, I'm good now, I guess a healthy way to pursue, right? Like that's it's a whole new ball game. I don't know how to do this. It's just like walking into the Mexican restaurant. I don't know how to do this. I've never done it this way before, right? But then you find that support system that says, here, let me show you, right?
Exactly.
I was just reading this article last night and it was talking about motivation. And I kind of had one of those mind blown moments when our coach, Jim, said, action comes first. Motivation comes from action. And I was like, what? Right? What do you mean? Right? But this article kind of went a little deeper and it talked about most of the time, motivation comes not just from action, but learning. Specifically, right? So when you learn something and it goes well, you become so much more motivated. But if you learn something and then it doesn't go well, most people, that's where they lose the motivation, right? And so I was thinking about this in terms of this kind of like, okay, I'm going to work from a place of peace and I'm still going to take action. And not let, the fact that, hey, I'm learning, right? I'm learning how to do this and not let that, oh, it's not going exactly how I hoped, control, right?
Yeah.
And still continue from that place of like peace and adding motivation, right? Like, hey, look how far you've already come. Keep going. Keep learning, keep moving, because there is no end game, right? There is no final line. There's no there. It's congratulations, you're in it. Welcome to the rest of your life, right? Like it's just going to keep going.
Exactly. It's one of the things I love to remind myself of is it's all made up. Like everything that I used to like judge myself by, somebody made it up.
Yeah.
I can just make up something else.
Right.
I am a very powerful creator. I've made up shit all my life. Now let's use it for good. Right? I say that all the time. Now I'm going to use my powers for good instead of evil.
Yes.
Well, Reshanda, I'm so happy that you were able to join us. I love having you here. So tell all the wonderful, wonderful people where they can find you on the socials, all that fun stuff.
Sure. You can find me at Reshanda Yates pretty much everywhere, but I'm most active on Instagram and on Facebook. And I just want to thank you so much for having me. Like, this was so fun.
And Reshanda has her own podcast. Remind the name of your own podcast.
I always mention my podcast. I don't know why, but it's the Ending Your Binge Eating podcast, and it's everywhere, anywhere that you like to listen to podcasts.
It's everywhere. Yeah, well, again, I love this. I have no doubt we're going to get like questions and all that fun stuff. So who knows? We may just have to have you on for part 2 just for fun.
I'm already
maybe that one we'll just like spirituality woo out because those tend to be our highest downloaded episodes anyway. So
I'm there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here.
Thank
and
you
everyone,
so much.
listeners. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
See ya.
If you have questions, we're here to help. Send us an email. Is there something you'd like to dive into deeper or learn more about? Send us an email. You can reach us at permissiontoexploreretreats.com.
If you want content like this daily, join us on Instagram and Facebook at Permission to Explore Retreats, as well as our personal handles, Kelly Pilates, that's Kellie Pilates, and Coach Lindsay Schwan is Coach_Lindsay_Schwan. If you type in Coach_Lindsay with an E_S, it'll come up.
I know it's a lot. I'm sorry. Lastly, a request, if you would please, leave a review or a positive, empowering, helpful comment.
And share with those who you think will find value. If you find value, others will too.
We're on a mission to help women just like you step into their personal power and experience more joy in life. Just imagine the impact we can have together simply by sharing.
We truly appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.